Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 68th webinar and the 6th series of webinars with us here with Dani and Greg. This is a fireside chat discussion with our experts of the industry. We look forward to an interactive discussion with each and every one of you. Please enter your questions and comments in the chat box, and we'll get to them as we can. We hope that, of course, everything is well with you, participants. Thank you again for joining, and I hope your families are healthy and safe. We look forward to an interactive webinar, as I just mentioned, so please do answer and comment in the chat window. We want this to be interactive. This is the 6th in the series of our end-to-end supply chain visibility series of webinars, tackling shortages and access inventory. We will share at least 3 best practices, hopefully even more best practices that you can start implementing, as well as some customer testimonials at the end of how it works. We focus on people, process, data, and technology to solve your fulfillment problems, improve cash flow, enhance customer experience, and increase revenue. Therefore, our discussion will demonstrate that ERP implementations do not need to be disruptive, and they can really help you, especially in these times ahead of us. My name is Jim DeVries, founder, president of Enhance International Group. Enhance International is a group of passionate experts to guide your transformation to provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS thought leader providers that have been vetted as best in class. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you the access of the best and the brightest companies, and we are like a Swiss Army knife. We cover all that people, process, data, technology. Our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partners' tenured thought leadership expertise. Our goal is to meet or exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs, providing you with a competitive advantage. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us 2 highly respected leaders in the field, Dani Kaplan and Greg Schlegel. Just a few words about Dani. Dani, for the past 20 years at SMC Data, has represented VAI's integrated ERP software. Dani has vast experience, and Dani, a few words.
It is supply chain software integrated for manufacturing, distribution of food. So in today's M&A world, a distributor can buy a manufacturer can buy a distributor, and a food can be both a manufacturer and distributor.
Thank you, Dani. And Greg, a few words of introduction before we go through the formal introductions.
You bet. Great to be here with you. Talk about our passion, supply chain and supply chain risk. I am the founder of a company called the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've been in business for over 12 years. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I've taught supply chain management, supply chain risk at 6 or 7 different universities. I still teach at Villanova. I'm an old IBMer, 8 years as an IBM supply chain exec, and perhaps many like you, 30-year supply chain practitioner with a couple of Fortune 100. So back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And with that, Dani, provide an overview of SMC Data.
It's a single database software that has manufacturing, distribution of food, warehousing, real-time analytic. We translate to knowing what products are selling, what to buy, and from whom to buy. And have a multiple vendor, because if you buy for one vendor and your inventory is stuck overseas or in China, it will come late, your production will suffer, your order will be canceled, and you go from a shortage inventory to excess inventory, resulting in cash flow issues. The entire system is real-time system.
Thanks, Dani. And Greg?
You bet. Just answering a question, Jim, from Mark about not being able to see anything in the chat box. So just so you know, while
All right, I'll send it again then.
Yep. I'll give everyone a quick profile, who we are, what we do. On the right-hand side, this is the Consortium. We're 31 companies, about 1,500 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. These companies bring tools, techniques, methodologies, solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. That's all we do. So you can see a cadre of companies bringing their skill sets on the right. What do we provide? What do we do? We got 5 areas. We have 2 online certificate courses, self-paced. They've been out there for about 4 years, doing quite well. You get a certificate and so forth, like an MBA class, all in a body of knowledge. 1 basic, 1 on public healthcare. We do coaching and consulting, obviously. We bring solutions, as I mentioned. We have 2 online assessment tools. 1 we'll talk about today, supply chain management online readiness, which will give you a thumbnail sketch of that today. And then our newest is a prescriptive online supply chain risk and resiliency 90-day action plan tool looking at your maturity and risk, your risk appetite, and your culture. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And as we said before, EIG is a group of 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers. We like to look at this bicycle slide that describes supply chain management and as the overall goal of the strategy. And we're going to start by recognizing that supply chain is an ecosystem. You may have heard the saying that we're only as strong as our weakest link. We take it a step further with the following bicycle analogy. The dry pedal wheel represents the strategy and how we're going to get there, and execution wheel is represented by that real wheel. And 1 strong rotation of the pedal, meaning strategy, and many will create many rotations of execution, and therefore drive momentum. So we like to say life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you got to keep on moving. So we're going to get moving here in the webinar. Just as a recap, this is webinar 6, tackling shortages and excess inventory. And we'll and our past webinars, we started off with end-to-end visibility with minimum disruption. You can find those on the EIG website. And our last webinar was on M&A integration with Greg and Dani. With that, we'll get right into the agenda today. And today's agenda, we'll start off with looking at what's today's supply chain landscape look like, and best practices in managing shortages and excess inventory. Then we'll get into leveraging ERPs to resolve the supply and demand imbalances. And then Dani will bring us through some transition success stories on leveraging ERPs to solve this challenge. And then summarized with some integrated ERP benefits. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started into the webinar. And this is really the key question is, how are we going to grow in this VUCA world? Especially, we know that we have higher inflation and we're headed for a recession, or as many say, we've been in a recession for a while. So, that alternate sourcing and supply chain network design is the main topic of today into the consideration of the following. Do you have the right size for your company? Do you have the right networks? And do you have supply chain risk management covered to cover all these VUCA events? And what are these 3 capabilities can create the ability to scale sustainable growth at a predictable cadence. And the risk events that are occurring with us every day, the remnants of the pandemic keep on getting it to us. Of course, we've been always dealing with these other ones, cybersecurity, counterfeiting, and others that will come in and haunt us as we keep going on and on. So with that, Greg, do you have any thoughts of how we're entering the VUCA world and where we're headed here in this next stage of the 4th revolution, industrial revolution?
Well, we've all been wrestling with, and that's why a lot of people are on the call with the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's basically been really driven by 2 years of the pandemic. Getting a little better in certain industries, but the VUCA and the Bullwhip we're going to talk about in a minute or two. It's been with us all our lives, but it's really been accelerated because of the pandemic and a few other I'll say gray rhino risk events. All right.
Yeah.
So it's getting better, but folks, it probably it's not over for a while yet. So that's why you're here.
Thank you. And Dani, a few words.
We are heading for a hard ride for a while. It's not going to change. The war in Ukraine and with China now trying to get Taiwan, supply will just become more difficult. And it's important to know what your fast moving items are, who to order and when to order.
Great points. Yeah. All our supply chains are completely going to be restructuring. The way we did business before the pandemic is not the way we're going to be doing business. Those supply chain routes are going to change dramatically. And we're going through that transformation right now of establishing what are our new supply chains. That's what's causing a lot of these issues. Greg?
You bet. We thought we'd share this with McKinsey. It's rather recent. They did a very comprehensive approach on supply chain regionalization is set to reshape global trade flows. We've had global supply chains for almost 25 years now. People doing it better, faster, cheaper. They did a nice survey on the feasibility of shifting and redesigning, even calling it nearshoring potential in global supply chains. They drove it by annual exports, which is in the middle column. You can see total exports. The nice part about it is they went across multiple industries, so you might be able to touch. You might be operating in one of those industries. They have deep pockets and a deep bench, so they can do a lot of detailed analysis. The nice part is they looked at annual exports that could shift geographies. What they did is they color coded them on the top left from small, low, light blue to very high, dark black. And then what they did on the right-hand side is they broke down the feasibility of nearshoring, onshoring, shifting and redesigning supply chains by two factors. One, economic, and you can take a look at their opinion in terms of low, medium, or high. And the other is non-economic, which to us is supply chain redesign and a few other supply chain risks. So the net is take a look at it. You can see, maybe identify with one of your industries, and then what we can tell you as we go through the entire discussion is it's beginning to happen, folks. It really is, and it's both from an economic point of view, dollars and cents, and non-economic, which is all of those supply chain risk factors. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dani.
Dani, your thoughts?
I'm sorry.
No, I think he's got yeah, go ahead.
Most likely, we are going to move into industrial in the USA rather than offshore, because the labor in China is becoming more expensive and the freight is becoming more expensive, and the fuel issue is become also an issue. Mm-hmm. A good example is IBM now investing in Kingston, I think, or upstate New York, in the manufacturing to build chips. Mm-hmm. So it looks like we are heading now back to manufacturing in the USA.
Yeah, so we're onshoring quite a bit, and economic feasibility in each of these markets. You can see apparel being one area that they say is high, right, Greg? And electrical equipment, computers, electronics, we're seeing that is what's happening. So it's pretty interesting as it's unwinding. I think on the onset of the pandemic, as you said, Greg, we talked about this that, when are we going to redistribute our supply chain, and meaning where are we going to manufacture? And it's changing now. It's taken a couple years for companies to respond and change. And that of course is going to be a different cost structure. And that's what we're seeing as it relates to inflation. But we're also seeing from a warehouse and transportation perspective is, through the pandemic, warehousing and transportation prices skyrocketed. And now since March or so, they've plummeted. And this is a survey from Dr. Zach Rogers. He puts out a monthly report that is pretty good at providing a really good understanding of where we're at today in the logistics area. And this chart jumped out at me on warehousing and transportation pre-pandemic all the way up to today. He also comments in his write-up about that, he was at the CSCMP conference, a recent one, and pretty much everybody feels like this is what's happening. And we're, seeing the transportation prices in red go down below that overall average is quite interesting. That spot market on transportation is probably, if you're doing spot markets, probably pretty good now, because you're probably getting a better cost than linking into long-term contracts. And warehousing pricing has finally started to come down. So now we may be at that point where we say, how many warehouses is enough? We feel like they're in everybody's backyard. And maybe we're getting close to that point where we may need to stop building warehouses soon. So I thought that was interesting report from him, just to see the price already peaked and now starting to recede. Greg, your thoughts? You're on mute, Greg.
I was just following my nose here. Transportation, yeah. At the moment, everyone on the call, I'm sure, is paying premium dollar for transportation, logistics, warehousing. We knew it was coming. Perhaps it's starting to get tempered a bit across a couple of different industries, but it will be with us until we get to quote unquote the new normal, which not sure exactly when that's going to hit. It'll probably take a while for several different types of industry segments to get back to some type of new normal. So,
Dani, your thoughts?
I was in a high-end webinar seminar of mid-market companies, and a friend of mine who's a supply chain warehouse expert said, the new trend is, rather than buying or building a new warehouse, raise the roof, so you have a mezzanine with extra room, make narrow aisles, and have narrow forklifts, so increase the warehouse capacity without relocating, affecting employees, and additional expense.
Thank you, Dani. With that, we'll go move on to Greg. On to the next slide.
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about supply and demand imbalances. So we thought we'd start with this one on the top left. It's kind of, these are the goals. The goals are to get a win for your suppliers, which is really aggregating and developing steadier supply requirements for you as a customer. We're looking for the win on the consumer side, the customer side, because what do you get if you win? You get reliable availability. Hopefully, maybe even some compressed lead times, because we could use a break, all of us, in terms of lead time latency. On the bottom portion, the red, yellow, green, it's more of a picture image of the cumulative effect of the imbalances, both from a demand and supply. And why do we have the imbalances, folks? Basically, it's for two reasons. One reason, I'm sorry. Government lockdowns equal artificial demand and supply shocks. We've been living with that for 2.5 years. So essentially, it's kind of the theme of our discussion today of supply and demand imbalances and how to essentially try to mitigate that. So we wanted to tee that dialogue up for you using this slide. And I think we have another slide where we'll further discuss the imbalances from the bullwhip effect. If you've been in supply chain logistics your career, you know all about the bullwhip effect. It's been there for 45 years. If you don't have a feel for bullwhip, here's what it is. It's the effect of the uncertainty caused from distorted information flowing upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers. Now we can talk a little bit about the different factors. On the demand side, top right or top left, just think of it this way. If you're a supplier and the customers are on the left-hand side of that little squiggle, think of it. For 2 years, any type of change in order quantity, order frequency, amplitude of the order at the customer level can manifest itself as it goes up the supply chain from retailer, wholesaler, manufacturer to supplier, and you can see the impact on your supply chain. Let's go to the next level. On the right-hand side of this particular graph is the supply side of the business. And take a look. On the left of that box could be a foundry, raw material. Any risk event or change in modus operandi for that foundry can manifest itself going downstream to the customer in the same basic thing. So in a bullwhip, we've experienced both demand shocks and supply shocks, basically because of the pandemic. What we did on the bottom is way back when, in April of 2020, we put together what we called the W-like recovery. And I'll just give you a definition of what you see. Take a look at the middle x-axis. Those are months. And then what we tried to do is superimpose different supply chains, color coding them in terms of what the bullwhip effect looks like. Blue is our retailers, red are wholesalers, green could be distributors, and orange could be the manufacturer. What you're looking at here over time is basically the lag time that is inherent in our supply chains and what we call supply chain latency. Now take that, put it on steroids when you have government lockdowns, and that's what we've been wrestling with, folks, for the last 2 years. With that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So with that, we're going to take that a step further and talk about shortages and accesses. So at the beginning, we were seeing a shortage on supply and our inventory because we were disrupted. We had too much demand in some areas, not enough supply, and not enough inventory in certain areas. And a little bit, we weren't having an oversupply at that point in time because we really didn't know what we needed. So our demand patterns are changing at this point in time because of the initial lockdown. As time went on, we started to look at alternate sources. And I feel like at this stage, we started to think that we were figuring things out, and we were starting to say, oh, we got this figured out. We're going to go back to the way it was. The problem is we can't go back to the way it is. Why? Because of the whole world has changed with China's lockdowns and Asia's lockdowns and different countries insourcing. So everything is now different, and costs are now higher than they used to be because the cost to get from China to here has gone up dramatically because all the containers are in the wrong place and we haven't recovered. A lot of that was transportation, but also it's about supply and demand and the need. So now what do we have? We kind of have it kind of going all over the place. In some areas, we have too much. We're still short on particular items, and other items we have too much of things. So, we have too much supply of the wrong materials due to timing and latency, and too much inventory and not enough demand. The BOMs are changing, our bill of materials are changing, remaining demand late deliveries, customers are canceling orders since they are finding alternative sources or are designing or making their products new, changing the BOM, changing the SKU, which then gets into SKU rationalization, which is where we're at now. If you haven't done SKU rationalization, it's probably something you really should be looking at based on what you can buy today. And that's disrupting the whole supply chain up and down. And so the new normal, as we've been discussing since the onset of the pandemic, it will be a new normal. It will not be the old normal. Greg, Dani, your comments?
The pattern have changed now, where people are buying on the internet rather than buying on going to the shopping mall, and the returns are very high. So that creates a brand new unbalance of supply and supply chain, where the department store and wholesaler are getting material back, and when those that have too little inventory, they end up with too much inventory now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll chime in. I guess what we've seen over the last, I'll say 18 months now, very encouraging to us because we're in the world of supply chain risk and resiliency. There is a robust dialogue going on across all industry sectors at the executive level in terms of supply chain efficiency, which is drive down cost, versus supply chain resiliency, which is basically survive and thrive. So very encouraging, because for 25 years, folks, we've done Lean, Six Sigma, drive down inventory, good, looks great on the balance sheet. And we've leaned out all our buffer stocks. And now when you have these types of bullwhip effects, boy, you get impacted rather quickly. So a very encouraging dialogue going on at the executive level between efficiency versus effectiveness. So
yeah. So in summary, if you lean so much yourself out so much, and you don't take into account a risk event, the risk event is going to certainly be impactful. So the bottom line is, do you know what your risk events are, and are you managing them proactively? With that, if I could, I'm just going to move on to excess inventory causing shortages. This is a topic that, how is all this linked? People say, we have a shortage. That doesn't cause anything on the access, but it does. So we'll walk through these steps here, 5 or so steps of how it comes about. So shortages are due to, again, the lockdown we've talked about, freight congestion, contract strikes, severe risk events, and cyber attacks. All what happened in the first 6 months of the pandemic, if you recall, we were fighting all those things. Then excess inventory is due to double, triple orders. So we're in that buy mode. We're looking for alternative vendors, regardless of cost, and expediting. So then we lived in that world of expedite, of course, driving costs up, having a little bit of impact on inflation there. Then with that, you have cash flow impacted. The free cash is reduced. You have excess inventory and freight costs. Your cash conversion cycle is now getting worse. Your payables increase, and now you're placed on credit hold, or your vendors are placed on credit hold. Somewhere up and down the supply chain, we're getting congestion now due to financial requirements. So, but then once you're on credit hold, then those shortages are exacerbated. You overorder where you can. And then of course you have missing components or raw materials in other areas, and then you're on a credit hold, and then you're on life support. So now you're held hostage to the financial requirements, and then you're in this downward spiral that continues to the bottom. You become an M&A target, and you get bought. So that's the worst thing that can happen, is you get bought by an M&A. And our last webinar focused on that particular topic. So this is our take on what could happen, or to some degree, some companies more or less degree. The more resilient you are, the more you're ahead of this. If you're not resilient, you're not thinking of that, and you're still around, you're in a good spot. Again, it's only you need to be better than your nearest competitor. So if everybody's bad, then everybody's bad. Greg?
Yeah, it's again part of the bullwhip effect. I wish we had a pithy $64,000 silver bullet for you, but it's going to take a while for the imbalances to play out. So hopefully we have a few threads where we can give you some helpful hints in the second half of this discussion, but it's not a pretty picture, folks.
Dani?
Today's reality became M&A heaven, because companies who suffer from the cash flow either have two choices: close business or be bought out.
Yeah.
But then the M&A creates a brand new obstacle, multiple ERPs. They don't talk to each other, create a whole brand new issue of not knowing where the inventory is. Multiple warehouses, one has too much inventory, one has too little inventory.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Thanks, Dani. All right, Greg, want to bring us through what we think can help them?
Well, this is kind of a we've been doing a lot of work on linking supply chain maturity processes to financial performance. Jim and I in the consortium have been doing a lot of work lately, and we think there's a very strong correlation between that. And we wanted to share with you, this is kind of what we teach in MBA Finance 401, folks. All right, it's basically benchmarking your industry, whatever industry you're in. And does it pay to be a leader? Our question, we think yes, it does, especially in times of crises, which we're exercising and living with today. On the right-hand side are classical quartiles in an industry. All right, leaders, followers, average, and laggards. We color code them. And then here's what we teach in 401 MBA. If you're in the first quartile as a company in your industry, you're probably looking to grow both organically and inorganically, which is M&A. If you're in the second quartile, the yellow, your company's probably rationalizing product lines because you're trying to reduce costs and increase cash flow like we talked about. If you're in the third quartile, those companies in the orange, sadly enough, are probably being looked at by the folks in the first quartile to grow inorganically, grab them, buy them, and you're purchased. And then if you're in the fourth quartile, those companies, pretty much as we've said, both Dani and Jim, there's a potential to basically not survive, especially during times of crises like this. So, where are you? We asked that proverbial question, where are you positioned in your industry? I think it's very important in times of crisis now and going into 2023 that you know exactly where your company is positioned. So with that, we'll talk a little bit more about positioning your company from a supply chain readiness point of view and maturity point of view. This is our chart from the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We've talked about this tool and chart several times during our webinar series with Dani and Jim. The Supply Chain Consortium has taken 30 years of supply chain management experience, along with our 12 years in risk management. And we've developed a supply chain readiness assessment tool that provides you two assessments real quick. It evaluates your supply chain process maturity and your inherent risk within those processes. So you can see there's 13 tenets. In our point of view, those are tenets that make up good supply chain. We've color coded them. The blue on the top right are strategic. The red on the bottom right are tactical, and the green on the left are operational. So the star chart is a maturity model depicting how mature your company's supply chain processes are. And remember, the lower the number that you see in the chart, the more mature the process. So as you go through these 90-some questions, you can see a company's response, which is the black line. And remember, the farther away from the center of the chart, the less mature your supply chain processes are. Secondarily, we've superimposed risks, inherent risks, as circles. You can see them. The green is where the exemplars operate. Those are low risks. The orange are additional risk. And then the red is what we call el fuego. You're on fire. Anything at or beyond the red line is you have very immature supply chain processes and you're basically at risk. So what we do is we have on the bottom right a free assessment. You can go in, click on the URL, you can walk through it. There's like 90-some questions, and you can get a sense of your maturity, because we think supply chain maturity is very, very tightly coupled with financial performance, especially going into the essential, we'll call it a downturn. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim for a question.
All right. No, it's great. I think that if you're on the edge of doing a ERP implementation, you're doing a lot of transitioning in your organization, and you haven't done a maturity assessment to see where you're at, where your strengths and weaknesses are. For a free assessment, you can take it yourself very easily. We also have a tier 2 where we look at it by company division and focus for a pretty low price, $2,000. We provide even more insights, and we'll also hook it up. We also have a tier 3 that hooks up into your annual operating plan. So it lines up with your AOP, and we can provide whatever you need to support that. So with that, we're going to move to the survey question again. What has been your recent experiences on shortages in excess inventory? And we'll please do answer the survey, poll EV/Jim DeVries 073. And looks like we have some responses. So let's see what we got here. It looks like 3/4 of the folks there are saying that they had severe shortages and accesses, and 25% moderate. Greg, what have you been seeing and hearing lately?
It goes across the board. It really does. Again, a lot of industries have more severe shortages and excesses than other, like commercial electronics, automobile manufacturers and assemblers who are actually completing cars without chips and modules in them and putting them out on the parking lots, actually selling cars without navigation systems, promising that when the chips come in, we've seen it across the board. No one is immune, no matter what industry sector you're in at the moment.
Dani, your thoughts?
It's become a new reality of shortages. I spoke to a person who went to a dealer and saw a whole bunch of BMW heavily discounted on the parking lot. And what Greg said, that when the parts are coming in, like a GPS, they will get it. But that's a brand new reality we are going to face now with the chip shortages. And I don't see it changing very, very, very soon.
Excellent comments. Thank you. With that, we're going to move to the second section on best practices in managing shortages and excess inventory. And Greg's going to share with us some ideal supply chain practices. Greg?
You bet. We'll be real brief here because we want to make sure we get to Dani and talk about some solutions. But this is kind of an ideal approach to supply chain practice, just to think system-wise on supply chain, what it can do for you, good supply chain, mature supply chain. So on the left, first, good supply chain can increase customer satisfaction. How? Take a look at like 2 o'clock on the left-hand side there. If you fulfill orders complete and you ship accurately and you ship on time and you have a responsive production group and you fill rapid order fulfillment, what does that get you? That gets you operational excellence. You become very good at supply chain. The second one on the right is you increase shareholder value. So if you drive cost reductions, which is still part of supply chain, you can get some tax relief. If you work on fixed capital efficiently, those are your assets. You can improve working capital. That working capital can help drive revenue growth, and that gives you market capitalization, which means you're improving your street value. And there's more. On the next slide, there's additional ideal. It fuels profitable growth. So think of it over on the right-hand side at 3 o'clock. If you run a good supply chain effectiveness, you cut costs at 6 o'clock there, cut costs, work inventories, optimize your assets, you're going to get additional capital to do what? To invest in increasing and improving business strategies to be better prepared and more responsive than your nearest competitor. So to us, supply chain management, it's a great circular economic approach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And the next best practice that we wanted to share is what we call the remedy that Greg and Dani and I came up with is, what can you do now, basically? Understand your inventory so that it is trustworthy. So 7 things here. And the second bullet is share data amongst internal departments and suppliers. You're probably going to have to restructure a lot of your contracts, both on your customer side and suppliers side. So if you're not putting time and effort into that now, that would be something you want to be starting to look at. Leverage your fast-moving products and reduce the slow-moving products. So we talked about SKU rationalization before. You need to start looking at that if you're not looking at it today. You confirm your demand priority with your customer again, and on the supply side, and then update your BOMs to reflect available and alternate suppliers, and consider vertical integration and internal increased capacity or capabilities. What can you do close by? That's the onshoring that we talked about early in the webinar. And so we're trying to get to that point where we are able to see everything. And if you leverage your ERP software to minimize shortages and access inventory in the meantime, then you have your short-term first look at a remedy to help you. Greg, any comments on this?
I would just, I think you went through it pretty good, Jim. I would just like to give Dani, opportunity now to profile some of the remedies,
Right?
Some of the helpful hints.
Yeah, Dani, any other comments on this before we move on to your next section?
No. Basically, knowing your demand by the customer and the availability by supplier, it's a key issue today.
Excellent. So with that, as we said, Dani will close us out with leveraging ERPs to avoid shortages and access inventory. Dani?
Okay, this is basically the company I represent via ERP. It has a completely interfaces between the supply chain, the operation, the management, the warehouse, the customer, over the cloud, accounting, inventory integration. It's basically, it all has to be real-time information. Otherwise, you have obstacles along the road not being interfaced. What happened is in M&A today, company has multiple ERP, and one of those boxes is broken, ending up with either excess inventory or shortage of inventory. Next screen, Jim, please.
Mhm.
This is an analysis of a real-time integrated software, what it gives you. It's a snapshot of the whole company doing business across the board. Inventory, financials, analysis. It's a total 360 view with the IBM Analytic Cognos. It gives you idea what to buy, when to buy, and how much to buy. Next one, Jim, please. This is a case study of a manufacturer that managed to control his inventory and by just in time have the inventory without business disruption. And the testimonial is the 25% were able to meet the demand without having the pandemic affect them. Next screen, please. That's another case study. You have to, while you enhance your productivity, you have to monitor your business model. Multiple factor affects it. How much inventory you have, when to purchase, how much to purchase, at what level, and for whom to buy. Don't buy for one vendor only, because if the inventory gets stuck over at the boat, trying to get into ship or close in China, your production will suffer and your inventory will be returned, and you go from inventory shortage to cash flow. Next, please, Jean. This is a case study of inventory shortages. This company is a pet supply that came from an outdated software. And when they saw the RF, the gun, the freeze, what the hell is that? And took them day to ship. So we gave them a smartphone with the RFD at the back, and that's the result. 99% accuracy, and ship the same day. Next, please, Jim. It's another case of a company that had M&A with a multiple system who talk to each other and create the issue. So they went to 60%, reduce the errors by 60% and achieve this result. The single database is crucial today. And this is a manufacturer that have 75 locations nationwide with 3 ERP systems. Inventory control was 60%, and now they're 99.95. They take the plastic residue and make a finished plastic. Having single ERP system, controlling all the locations, achieved 99.95 accuracy, and they went live with 0 disruption with all the location. Next, Jim. Worldwide manufacturer, moving from 3 ERPs to 1 ERP and a cost reduction. 90% accuracy to 95.5. And big cost reduction. Next one, Jim, please. The benefits of having one system. You achieve this kind of ROI. Imperial Dead went from $100 million to $10 billion in 10 years using the VI software. Black River is $75 million company using a headset because vegetables have no products have no barcode. And Atom Harp is a cosmetic company manufacturer that achieved this reliability. Next, Jim, please. This is what the software does. Single database software runs on the cloud in multiple IBM Analytics that interface to it, Salesforce, e-commerce, mobile. The reps can order on the phone. They don't have to call the customer service. The contractor can enter the order on the phone, update the host computer. We have a client with 200 locations nationwide. The contractor enter the order at night and it's trained in the morning, 3 shifts running. It's a complete integrated system, running real time. Next, please. That's another case study of a manufacturer. And that's what they achieve. As you can see, a single database software that's integrated here, quite a big result. And that's what the company represent offer. It's cloud or server. 90% of the people are going to the cloud now. Source code is provided, which is highly unusual in the industry. And it will customize to meet to business requirement, unless SAP or Epic or thing like that. A square peg and a round hole. If you have 100 users, you can buy unlimited user upfront, like Imperial did, or Roma, because the 100 users can be to more 300 users. So that enables you not to have to buy more users, and it's integrated multiple application like a warehouse tracking, but tell the warehouse multiple trucks, how much will fit on each truck. At the back goes the last delivery, and the front goes the first delivery. When the truck leaves, it becomes too amazed. Tell the driver what the best route is. It's for the mid-market companies starting at $30 million, up to $1 billion. Average client of ours are 50 to 100 to 250,000 $1 million company. That's basically it. Next, Jim.
Thanks, Dani. Appreciate it. Great wrap up. Lots of case studies of how what good looks look like and how those companies are surviving and thriving even in this time of contraction in the marketplace. With that concludes our webinar today. We do have 5 minutes, so if you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. Meanwhile, I'll just let you know that we do have a webinar coming up in mid-November on the rising inflation driving consumer diminishing demand. And we'll look at ways to survive, ensure your survival, some additional best practices focused in that area. And again, all our webinars are on the EIG website. This webinar will be on the EIG website. We'll be sending out the slides here in the next day or two, probably by Friday. All the slides will be available for you that join. So thank you very much for joining. And again, EIG, we look at things from a people, process, data, and technology perspective. We have over 50 vetted experts in the field. And with that, we have some closing comments. Dani, any closing comments?
We have some question, Jim.
Oh, we have some questions. What advice would
Yes.
you give companies that get visibility to customer demand, that can't get visibility to customer demand? Greg, you want, or Dani, do you want to take this one first?
The key is to have integrated system. If you don't have integrated system, you have broken links, and that will not give you the information you need. Greg?
I would say this about that. If your customer will not share information with you, perhaps they're not an ideal customer. All right. I hate to be glib, but you know, if they don't share information and you can't integrate it, that says a little bit about the relationship. So just be advised.
Yeah, I would just say that in the short term, of course, you can look at their previous order demand and you can run on that. And honestly, for 80% of your volume, probably looking at previous demand, it's going to tell you a pretty good indication of what's coming, unless you're seeing a lot of attrition and maybe just starting up some collaborative discussion. I'd look at existing demand today for the last, 18 months, 2 or 3 years. And then I also have some sessions with your sales reps and at the regional level, and get their feedback of what they're seeing in the marketplace, and then have them start tracking. Are they seeing, just simple, are their customers going up or down? Look for the outliers. Try to identify what customers are we seeing a large increase and which customers are seeing a large decrease. And just those simple things can help you get where you need to be before you get real-time visibility. Any other questions out there that I missed?
I'm looking as well. I'm trying. I can add another little bow tie on that discussion. What you might want to think about is segmenting your customers. Remember, folks, 20%, only 20% of your customers provide 80% of your profits and contribution margin. If you were to segment those customers and treat customers differently, that customer may be what we call a loser. All right. And you may want to shed that customer, but you need to segment your customers first so you don't make the wrong decision for the wrong reason. Yeah.
And I would just add one more thing for Greg onto that is when you segment them, the quickest way is your low revenue customers, small customers, let's call them, medium customers, and large customers. Just segmenting in those 3 simple blocks can provide you quite a bit of information, and understand that you sometimes are focused on the large customers, but the medium-sized company is your bread and butter. And if you see a large drastic change in your medium-sized company, which are probably providing most of your profitability to your bottom line, those are the customers you need to be paying attention to, and are often ignored in these times.
Another factor, Jim, is if you work with the Amazon, Walmart type, you cannot forget about your smaller customers, because in the olden days with JCPenney, when they drop you, you're out of business. So you have to really proportionally allocate the inventory and not only accommodate the big guys, forget the smaller guys, because the black cat passes between you and the big guy, you have a big issue in your company.
Great. I love this discussion to wrap up the webinar. I'll just close it out. My thoughts, tackling shortages and excess inventory are intertwined, as we discussed. A concerted effort by the team will need to be done, and to take into account this interlinkage. And what can you do now? You can increase that transparency through ERP and IoT, Internet of Things, and tracking and traceability. You can track changes in inventory levels by SKU, customer, location, segmentation, as Greg said. Proactively have tough discussions with your customers and suppliers in those changes, that there's changes of demand and supply that you have. Make sure you communicate. Greg, your thoughts?
I would just finish it with, we talked about the bullwhip effect, folks. That'll be with us probably through 2023. All right. And I would say supply chain visibility through perhaps integrated ERP type systems, going to be critical for a critical success factor for probably the next year, all through 2023 for survival. So
Thanks, Greg. And Dani, close us out, please. If you think about buying a competitor and having multiple ERP, you better think twice, because multiple ERP will result in severe business disruption. If one warehouse has too much inventory and the second warehouse has too little inventory, and excess user effort trying to retrieve the data hopscotch between one system and another system. Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us. I hope you found the webinar beneficial.
And we'll be posting this on EIG's website by Monday. Thank you and have a great week ahead and weekend.